Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hussey's Huddle. In this video, we're going to be recapping an exciting week 2 in the CFL from the 2022 season, and I'm really excited to get into it today. But really quickly before we get started, as always, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Really helps me out. We recently crossed 500 subscribers, and I will be making an announcement in the near future about what we're going to be doing to celebrate that. And all your help is very much appreciated. I really appreciate all the help everyone has given me with building this channel. And with that said, let's get started with the video. So before we get into the games themselves, I just wanted to say one of my general observations, and that is that the East Division sucks. This is something that we did not expect going into this season. I didn't expect, many people did not expect. A lot of people actually thought the East was going to be better than the West this year, and that's just simply not the case yet again this year. It's a small sample size, but West teams are 5-0 versus East teams so far this season, with a couple of big comebacks by the Calgary Stampeders versus the Montreal Alouettes and the Hamilton Tiger Cats to really solidify that stance. So, it's early, but, the fact that they're 0-5 versus the West is not a good sign. I've even seen people that were predicting the East to have a crossover to the West for the first time ever. And, if you're going to have that, you need to win and dominate the matchups with the West Division, which is just not going to happen. And it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. So that's just my general takeaway from this week and the first couple weeks of the season. But the first game we're going to talk about here was the Thursday nighter between the Montreal Alouettes losing to the Toronto Argonauts by a score of 20-19 on a last-second field goal. And we're just going to jump in and we'll talk about the losers first in all of these games. So with the Montreal Alouettes, the first thing is you just have to make that short field goal. That would have been just such a huge win for this franchise. Given what they have surrounding the organization right now, you have a lot of questions surrounding the quarterbacks. The owner is, guaranteeing victories. That would have been a huge victory for this franchise. And unfortunately, a kicker just botches a kick that is shorter than any kick is possible in the NFL. I was explaining this to my friend. I believe it was a 17-yard field goal. The shortest possible field goal on an NFL field is 18 yards. So that is very disappointing that he wasn't able to make that kick. So, that is a heartbreaking loss for the Montreal Alouettes. But in terms of positive things to take away from it, and I don't think many people are actually going to say this, but I thought Trevor Harris, when he came in to relieve Vernon Adams after Vernon Adams just had a dreadful start to the season, the game, he just didn't have anything going. Trevor Harris comes in and was that classic veteran that provided more rhythm to the offense. And I was really happy to see that from the Alouettes' perspective. And it really brings up a big question about who is going to be starting for this team week 3 versus Saskatchewan. They're facing an 0-3 start if they lose that game, so it's going to be very crucial for them to pick up a victory in that one, but it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I actually have a poll over on the community tab who is going to be starting for the Alouettes in week 3. Trevor Harris or Vernon Adams, go vote over there on the community tab. But ultimately, very disappointing loss for the Alouettes, and, it's just a bad start to the season. And then on the Toronto side of things, I think the main thing I take away from this game is that Andrew Harris and Brandon Banks actually looked pretty good in this game. It's just one game, and obviously they're older players, and the main question is going to be, are they going to hold up health-wise? But Andrew Harris looked very good. He ended up tweaking his hamstring, I believe, at the end of the game, but I don't know if it's completely serious, just not known at this time, but he has a history of that with the injuries that he suffered last year, so keep an eye on that going forward. But I thought he made a big difference to this Toronto offense. They definitely would not have won without him. And then Brandon Banks scores a touchdown that was very reminiscent of the player that he used to be, in my opinion. So that is a very good sign going forward for the Argonauts. And then the other thing I have to take away from this game is that they will only go as far as McLeod Bethel-Thompson will take them. McLeod Bethel-Thompson actually had a pretty terrible game in this one. The stats really won't show it because there was a clear dropped interception in the end zone by the Alouettes that, was one of the worst throws I've seen from a CFL quarterback in a long time. Just kind of threw it to the right side of the field, and there really wasn't anybody really in the area, and the defender could just see the interception coming from like 5 seconds. It was a really bad throw, but the receiver was able to come over and kind of, interrupt the defender enough to break it up, but it's bailed out there. And then there were a couple other plays. There was another interception that was a deflection off the hands of the receiver. And some people will say those deflected interceptions are not on the quarterback, but in this case, I definitely think it was. It was a bad throw, just hit off the fingertips of the receiver, tipped for the interception. So that was unfortunate, and he also got crushed on this one sack that led to a fumble. So 3 turnovers on the day, really, for McLeod Bethel-Thompson. And I didn't think he looked all too good otherwise. He always moves the ball pretty well. So in terms of yardage, he's always going to look pretty good at the end of the day. But ultimately, not a very good showing from McLeod Bethel-Thompson. He'll have to be better going forward. And then the Friday night rematch between the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Ottawa Red Blacks. And this is kind of the same story as it was in week 1, with the Ottawa Red Blacks just narrowly losing to the defending Grey Cup champions. And honestly, Ottawa moved the ball very well between the 20s, but when it got to the red zone, they just could not put it in the end zone, ended up settling for 4 field goals in this one. And Winnipeg only had a couple of really good drives, but they were able to capitalize with touchdowns and trade 7 for 3s, and ultimately that math is going to work out in their favor here with the victory. And, you know, in terms of takeaways for this team, for Ottawa to start off, I think that red zone offense, like I just mentioned, is the big concern for this team through 2 weeks, because obviously they can move the ball. They have a good enough receiving core. They can spread the ball around, hurt you in a lot of different ways. The running game, Devontae Williams looks really good, actually, filling in for William Powell the last couple weeks. Been very impressed by him. But ultimately, I think the main question is just the ability to put the ball in the end zone. This was actually something that Mazzoli struggled with at times in Hamilton. The red zone offense just wasn't too good. So Mazzoli, that's one thing that he'll have to improve in his game. But in terms of actually moving the ball efficiently, this is just years and light years ahead of where they were last season. So you got to be happy if you're a Red Blacks fan. One moment in this game that I thought was very key was a 3rd and 1 in the 4th quarter with Ottawa driving, and there was a fumble by Jeremiah Mazzoli on the quarterback sneak, and Winnipeg is able to recover the ball. They were up 13-12 at the time, and then when they got the turnover, they were able to go and get the lead extending touchdown. So that was very crucial to Winnipeg. Just little timely mistakes for Ottawa, but you know, you really have to like what you've seen the first couple weeks despite the 2 losses. I definitely expected them to go into this season and lose these first 2 games, but the way that they lost the games is very encouraging actually for this team going forward. And I think if they fix a few things, they're going to be right on the right track. And then on the Winnipeg side, I think what you could say the first couple of weeks is they have yet to fire on all cylinders like we saw in 2021. Basically, they ran roughshod over the entire CFL last regular season, and we haven't seen that team yet. Maybe that's due to losing a couple of guys in that offense, but ultimately, I think they've been very opportunistic, turnovers, timely sacks, good pressure from that front 7, which is still the best front 7 in the CFL, and ultimately that was probably one of the main reasons why they were able to shut down Ottawa in the red zone in this game. And ultimately, Winnipeg, because of that, they're still the best team and the team to beat in the CFL. They're just so solid, they can beat you in so many different ways, whether that's the passing game, the running game. They proved last week that they could win without having a great running game. The running game was a little bit better this week, which helped. And ultimately, I think Winnipeg Blue Bombers, like I said, is still the team to beat going forward. And finally, I just wanted to touch on one player that has just really impressed me yet again this season, and that is defensive back Dietrich Nichols of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who I actually had as my #1 ranked halfback in the CFL this year. And he has not disappointed with a huge pass breaker in the end zone this game against Ottawa. And I'm really interested to see how he plays going forward. He's making me look very smart for putting him as that #1 halfback in the CFL, despite other players in this Winnipeg secondary looking a little shaky. Guys like Winston Rose not playing very well through 2 weeks, but Dietrich Nichols has held up his end of the bargain, had a great game in this one, and I'm very excited to see what he does the rest of the season. And then moving on to Saturday's action, starting with the Hamilton Tiger Cats hosting the Calgary Stampeders, with the Stampeders coming back to win in overtime 33-30. And we have to start with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Another 4th quarter collapse for this team. You look back to the Grey Cup last year, very disappointing, and there have been countless examples in the history of the Tiger Cats in recent years of blowing 4th quarter leads. And this is just another example, and this is probably maybe the worst blown lead ever, really. And I'm really interested to see how this team responds from this mentally. This is kind of just a very deflating game. They had everything firing on all cylinders in the first quarter. I was at this game. They were playing so well. It just felt like everything was going right for them in the first half. And then just the flip side of that happened in the second half where, just random things just started happening to them. That 3rd and 1 play where I've never seen any play like that, where Dane Evans goes for the quarterback sneak and thought his forward progress was stopped for a couple of seconds there. And usually they blow the whistle there, but I think it's because that he was still trying to, I don't think they were going to get it. So I think the refs were giving them the, advantage to kind of, play out. But that ultimately did not work in the Tiger Cats' favor. They ultimately end up fumbling, and Calgary ends up scooping and scoring for a touchdown. And I've never seen a play like that in CFL history, really, honestly. You guys will have to let me know in the comments section if you guys have seen a play like that. But I've never seen a 3rd and 1 sneak play result in a touchdown like that unless it's near the goal line. So very interested to see how the Tiger Cats respond from really blowing this game. And another thing that really stands out for the Tiger Cats in this game in the first couple of weeks is the turnovers. By my count, they had 4 last week and 3 this week. So 7 turnovers through 2 weeks. And that just cannot continue if you want to be winning football team in the CFL. Dane Evans got to do a better job taking care of the football. He already has 3 fumbles and 4 interceptions on the season, so he accounts for all of those turnovers. And not all of them are his fault. He had the interception in overtime, which definitely was not his fault, dropped by Thomas Erlington. But, ultimately, I think Dane actually had a very good game besides those turnovers, but it just, at the end of the day, you have to take care of the ball. Those are going to be the key moments in CFL games. You cannot give CFL teams offenses short fields because in this league, it's very hard to drive the length of the field, but it's very easy to capitalize on those short fields, and that is exactly what the Calgary Stampeders were able to do in this game. There was a big interception in the end zone by Titus Wall, who had an incredible game for the Calgary Stampeders in this game. He ended up scoring the touchdown on that 3rd-and-1 fumble play, and he got the interception in the end zone, which really was the turning point I felt in the game. I was just like, why is Dane taking that risk and throwing that ball into the end zone there? But ultimately, just a very disappointing game from a Tiger Cats perspective of being at the game, just seeing the life just sucked out of the game. Just very disappointing. They're staring 0-3 in the face going into next week playing at Winnipeg, so we'll see how they respond. And then from a Calgary perspective, I think the biggest takeaway for me is their excellent coaching staff. They were able to make adjustments on the fly. They really got smacked in the face in the first half of this game and really had to make a lot of wholesale changes on the fly. Kadeem Carey, their star running back, ends up getting injured in the first half, I believe, in this game. And then their backup running back, Peyton Logan, who came in and made a few plays in the screen game, looked really good. He actually ends up getting hurt on a scary hit by Tunde Adeleke. And ultimately, they're left with no running backs for the large portion of the second half of this game. And ultimately, they were able to make the coaching adjustments necessary to keep moving the ball. A lot of that is due to Levi Mitchell, who played very, very well in this game. He was kind of lights out in the second half after having a very poor first half in this game and really reminded us of the quarterback that he can be. And I'm very excited to see if he can continue that going forward. But this is just a huge win to get the Calgary Stampeders to 2-0 this season. And my last thing I want to mention about this game, in addition to Levi Mitchell's strong play, was the play of those superstar wide receivers, Kamar Jordan and Reggie Begelton. And Begelton, I believe, only finished with 6 catches for 48 yards, but that does not tell the story. He came up with every clutch catch just to get them beyond the sticks, get them key first downs. He was making key play after key play in this game. Also had a 30-yard pass early in the game that was called back due to a penalty. And Kamar Jordan really showing that contested catch ability down the field. He was very impressive in this game. And I think if those guys play like they can, they are going to be a very dangerous team this season. Now moving on to our last game of the week, which is the Saskatchewan Roughriders beating the Edmonton Elks by a score of 26-16. And starting with Edmonton, the losing team here, they had a much better effort, especially defensively in this game. Offensively, they ultimately ended up scoring around the same points, but defensively, much better effort. They tackled a lot better, generated some pressure on the quarterback at times in this game, and ultimately were able to keep the game close and actually had the lead at points in this game. And ultimately, if it wasn't for a few mistakes, they could have actually walked out on top here. And so I was very impressed by the bounce back ability of the Edmonton Elks. Again, I still think it's going to take them some time to figure a lot of these things out with all the new players that they have here on this team. but it was good to see that they actually have the ability to be a professional football team, unlike the one we saw in week 1. And then another thing for them is that this Kenny Lawler addition, say what you want about him, they made him a super highly paid player, the highest paid non-quarterback in the CFL, I believe, this season. But he is paying off through 2 weeks. He is playing lights out, and he's really proving to be that number one target that this offense needs. Now, if they could ever get a quality quarterback to play with them, I think he is going to be a very, very dangerous player for this team, like he was with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And he's really holding up his end of the bargain so far in Edmonton. Had an incredible touchdown catch in the red zone. And honestly, I think that this was a guy that I thought maybe last year was kind of a career season for him. Kind of had the perfect situation in Winnipeg where he had all these surrounding pieces and they just needed that number one guy. But in this scenario in Edmonton, he is basically the number one guy, clear cut. There's not really many guys around him that have proven a whole lot at the CFL level, except for Manny Arsenault, who made a couple of plays in this one. But ultimately, Lawler has really proven that he is still that number one guy, and he can translate that to a new setting in Edmonton, which has been very impressive to me. And then on the Saskatchewan side, a few things to take away. One was that the running game got going a little bit in this game after being very dormant in week 1 versus Hamilton. That was to be expected with Hamilton's great run defense, but they were able to run the ball very well in this game against Edmonton's front, which is very encouraging. Jamal Morrow looked very, very good in that number one running back role. So very impressive to see that and see if he can continue that going forward. I started him in fantasy. And then also, another thing I want to point out is a big injury that they suffered in this game was offensive lineman Dan Clark, who I think is their best offensive lineman up front. Really that road grader type at that center position that has been there for years. I believe he's their longest tenured player. He ends up getting carted off late in this game, and unfortunately, that is just going to be a huge blow to this team going forward, in my opinion. He is their best offensive lineman, in my opinion. He really sets the tone for them up front, and obviously at that center position, you have to do a lot of communication. It's not always easy to find a guy to play that role and call out the protection, so it's going to be very interesting to see who they end up starting in that role, assuming it's a big major injury here for Clark. I just think that could be a gigantic loss for the Rough Riders going forward. But ultimately, they pull out a victory here. I thought it was a good team win overall. They move on to 2-0, and they play Montreal next week. But overall, those are just my takeaways from week 2 of the 2022 CFL season. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comment section as always. Who do you think is the favorite in the East? Who do you think is the favorite in the West after 2 weeks? Be sure to let me know your thoughts, and be sure to hit like and subscribe on your way out the door. I would really appreciate it. And with that said, hope everyone has a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.